We're at the halfway point of the tournament, but it's a new start for some. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. Okay, so round 3 of the Six Nations, and, as I said, it's a midway point. Nobody's going to win the tournament this weekend, but certainly, there's probably going to be one team, we don't know which one yet, but probably one team will be pretty much out of the running, except for very exceptional circumstances in terms of other results. So, big weekend for the competition. As I said, we got new starts as well there, and there's a lot of excitement in terms of the matchups. I think one of the great things about the Six Nations is you just mix those teams around, and then there's always something, some kind of edge to each of the games as well. It's I think that's why it's such an enduring tournament is because of all the history that's there, and then all the little extra pieces around games as well. But we're going to look at first of all the fixtures themselves. Then we'll talk about each of the games as well, the usual stuff that we go through, and how I think the game is going to go. And then we'll throw it over to you then once we're done with that. So first game, Saturday 22nd of February, is Wales versus Ireland. It's a 2:15 kickoff. Then same day, England versus Scotland, 4:45 kickoff. The first game for people watching Ireland is on Virgin Media, and the second game is on RTE. And then on Sunday, the final game of the weekend is Italy versus France, 3 o'clock kickoff. And again, if you're watching Ireland, Virgin Media is where you're going to catch that. Okay, so let's start with the first game of the weekend, and that is Wales versus Ireland. So Wales v Ireland, as I said, Saturday 22nd of February 2025. It's in the Principality Stadium, 2:15 kickoff. So I think if you're watching in South Africa, I think it's a 4:15 kickoff. Last year it was Ireland 31, Wales 7. And 2 years ago, the last time they played in the Principality was Wales 10, Ireland 34. So pretty comfortable margins for Ireland in both of those. And that's kind of reflected in the odds. Wales 20-1 to win, and Ireland 25-1 on, and then 80-1 the draw. So bookies not giving Wales much chance, and I don't think anybody is, honestly. But there's some factors that may change that, and we'll talk about those in a second. But can't remember the last time Wales were such outsiders to win at home in the Six Nations. Normally, even if they're not the favourites, they're not too far away. At least you kind of feel like a decent performance, they would have a chance to win. But these odds are basically saying that the bookies don't believe that that's even possible. So, and I'm not sure if I agree with that. But let's talk about the other stuff that's going on. So first of all, Warren Gatland has left his role as the Wales head coach, and also Howley, who was there, who was brought back only a couple of weeks ago, he's left as well. So both of them out, and then we have Matt Sharrett and Rhys Thomas have come in their stead. So Matt Sharrett is in there temporarily. He is the head coach of Cardiff, and given that there are plenty of Cardiff players in there, at least he may be able to come in and have an impact in the short term. Longer term, there's lots of people being put forward potentially as the next Wales coach. We've heard, like, obviously Simon Easterby, who is Ireland's interim coach while Andy Farrell is away with the Lions. He's been mentioned, given the fact that he lives in Wales and his wife is Welsh as well. Certainly it'd be a better commute for him. Also, talk of Franco Smith from Glasgow potentially being in the mix there. Obviously, former Italy head coach as well. Then, people like who else did I hear mentioned? what's his name? Was that Racing 92? Stuart Lancaster. Yeah, Stuart Lancaster mentioned as well. I think he'd be very good actually there. I think he'd be someone you'd want to bring in, maybe even a director of rugby role for him. I think he'd be someone who could, because he had great success with England at age grade, obviously before he became the England coach because of the debacle when, down in New Zealand, when they just went crazy. I think he'd be decent at maybe director of rugby role and then bring somebody else in as the head coach, because I think he'd get in there and, maybe sort out the age grade, look at the pathways coming through, etc., and just get a system there. We know he's had good success with Leinster in the past as well. Obviously not going to be able to replicate their model just because it's based on having a lot of very rich, private schools in the Dublin area, which I don't think the Wales, you're not going to be able to magic them out of nowhere, but there will be lessons learned from his time in Ireland, certainly. But certainly some interesting names going ahead there. And I think once they do get somebody in long term, Wales are not going to be down at the bottom for forever. Like, they are going to rise again, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be on Saturday. But I do expect that they're going to have a bounce, at least from having a new coach in there. They're going to be, certain things are just going to be a little bit tighter, a little bit zippier, and they're certainly at the start of the game, I expect Wales to be more competitive than we've seen them in the first two rounds so far. Maybe, over time though, Ireland are probably going to wear them down and pull away with the win. But, Wales, they lost to Italy, and Italy looked very comfortable in that game. They only scored one try, but they looked like if they needed to score again, they could. It didn't feel like Wales were kind of threatening them, even though they got a couple of late tries to get a losing bonus point. But attack for Wales not firing, they were still way too deep. So I think that's something that, Charlotte is probably going to change, because Cardiff don't, play a lot flatter to the line. So and he's got a short amount of time, so he's probably going to try and get them to play similar to Cardiff. Probably not exactly the same, but certainly, it would make sense. Scrum, though, is one good thing that they have. Like, Wales so far in terms of scrum completions, the best in the Six Nations. So that's certainly a positive for them there to build on. And the fact that, Charlotte immediately brought back in the likes of Anscombe, and he brought in 210s into the squad. Recall a few other players as well. So, players that for whatever reason Gatland decided to freeze out, and crazy decision by Gatland as well, not to have a recognised 10, in his squad, and was playing a 12 in the 10 role, didn't make any sense at all. So certainly going to see some improvements from them, but you have to wonder, how much of an improvement is going to be compared to the team that are playing on Saturday. But Ireland, we do know, like the Ireland team, I don't think it's out yet, but we do know that Doris, Kelleher and Furlong probably all going to be are definitely all going to be out of the game. So I think Doris, a knee injury. Furlong was injured coming into the tournament anyway, and it was kind of touch and go whether he was going to make this game. And it could be one of these ones, kind of similar to last year, where they keep saying, "Oh, Furlong might be back next week. He might be back next week," and then he doesn't actually make an appearance in the Six Nations this year. I think Kelleher is going to be a miss as well, because he's been going well, especially with Sheehan coming off the bench has worked for Ireland too. I think Sheehan's much better at the moment off the bench, just because of that ability. When the game breaks up, his ability around the park. So having him starting, and I don't know, is it going to be Gus McCarthy? Maybe we'll get a chance, to back up off the bench. He's a player I have a lot of time for as well. Good young prospect for Ireland. I would like to see him get minutes in the Six Nations. But, Ireland, they beat Scotland comfortably. I don't think that Ireland are going to rotate the team as much as people would maybe predict. I think a lot of people would look at this and go, okay, it's Wales, so let's give the wider squad a bit of a run. So put in, the likes of Osborne, Izuchukwu, maybe even bring Boyle onto the bench, at loose head, and rest, the likes of Van der Fleer, and probably give Crowley a start ahead of Prendergast. Give Gibson Park a rest and bring somebody else in at 9, etc. Maybe give Lowe a rest. I don't think there's going to be wholesale changes. There might be a few changes. We know there are going to be a few changes because of injuries, at least. But beyond that, there may not be too many more. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Is Ireland, compared to other teams, even we see it at World Cups, they don't rotate as much as other teams, and probably not as much as they should either. There's always been times when we've gone, especially World Cups, where we've gone in and thinking, well, why is this guy at the World Cup if he's not going to get any minutes? Like, why are we just constantly picking like our best team all the time, and then we get to the quarterfinal and we don't perform, and normally it's the fact that coming up to the quarterfinal, somebody very important gets injured, and then the guy who has to replace him has hardly any minutes, and then coming in cold, doesn't perform. And that's my worry with Ireland, is that we probably don't rotate as much. But also, I think, there's two things to it. You got the idea of being complacent, so taking Wales lightly and thinking, well, everybody else so far has beaten them very comfortably. We should be able to rotate almost the entire team and still beat them pretty comfortably. And, you don't want to go in with that attitude, certainly. But at the same time, I don't think the way Ireland do it, which is let's try and pick almost the same 23 bar injuries, for every single game is a good idea either, because you need that. You need those, couple of players who've come in on merit because of what they did during the week in training or wherever, and are there getting rewarded. So maybe like an extra couple of players, bar the guys who are coming in for injuries, to come in, but to give that extra kind of, impetus to the team, and basically say to the wider squad that your performance in the camp actually does matter in terms of your selection for the team. It's not just going to be, that everybody else is nailed on, and unless they're injured, that's the only chance you're getting. So for me, I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see guys getting rewarded for what they're doing in camp, and be able to get, even if it's just a spot on the bench or something, but being able to come into the 23 for games and be involved in the 23 as well, and not have guys who are maybe tearing up in training and then it doesn't matter, you're not getting picked at the weekend. So, but the other thing in terms of why I don't think Ireland are going to rotate that much through this tournament, is because it's a Lions year, and rightly or wrongly, I think a lot of people are expecting that there will be a lot of Irish players on the Lions tour, given Andy Farrell is Ireland head coach, very familiar with the players. Ireland at this stage look like they're going to finish probably top 2 at least in this Six Nations. So you'd expect, if they do finish in that position, that they would have a decent group of players going on the Lions. Then traditionally, other players who maybe don't get selected for the Lions would be rested for summer tour, and then the wider squad who are here and maybe not involved so much into 23 will be going on the summer tour, wherever the summer tour happens to be, plus some elements from maybe emerging Ireland teams from the last couple of years as well. So I think that summer tour is probably where Easterby is planning to give a lot of the wider squad, the likes of Izuchukwu, maybe bringing in some players who are currently outside of the squad, maybe like a Gavin Coombs or someone like that. like Ahern and those guys, and giving them chances in the summer rather than now. So we may not see too many changes to the Ireland team. For Ireland as well, like set piece is going well. Scrum, in terms of, as I said, Wales have the best scrum in terms of completions, but I think Ireland probably have, certainly in the first 2 rounds, probably the best scrum in terms of an attacking scrum and winning penalties, which we're kind of not used to in Ireland, because like we've had this thing for a number of years where Andrew Porter has been on the wrong side of referees, and you know the scrum has kind of been one where you're almost dreading it because you're thinking, is he going to give away another penalty? But he seems to have fixed that, like, because teams were making it so that he would appear to be, kind of driving in, because they'd set it up so that he looked like he was doing that. He probably was before, but then they made it look like that to referee as well. But he seems to have fixed that. Doesn't mean that it's going to go that way all the way through the tournament, but seems to be much better in the scrum, and also better around the pitch because of it. And I always talked about that, Andrew Porter, in terms of his contribution around the field, it hinges kind of on how he's going in the scrum as well. Things going against him in the scrum, he goes into his shell and doesn't have as good a performance around the field. But yeah, line out as well, actually going well, even though coming into the Six Nations, you would have said it was easily the worst line out coming into the Six Nation of the 6 teams, but they seem to have sorted that. Let's see if they do it again, because Wales actually, one thing again for them, the scrum's going well, but they've always been decent in terms of disrupting opposition lineouts as well. So we see how that goes. And then another thing is, Ireland in the last couple of years were holding onto the ball and going through a massive amount of phases until they worked a position or they spotted a mistake in the defence, and then they would exploit it. Whereas now they're not holding onto the ball anywhere near as long as they were before. And what they're doing instead is they're trying to, strike off 2, 3, 4 phases. And then if something isn't on, they look for a different option. Can we put a kick over the top of Grubber? Is there a chance to kick long into space? Is there a 50-22 on? Those kind of things. So very tactics from them now as well. So the old way that they were doing was kind of very attritional on the opposition. Carry the ball a lot, make them make a lot of tackles, tire them out, and then find a space. Whereas now that they're trying to basically have more strike moves, where a couple of phases, it's almost not quite, but it's almost going back to kind of Joe Schmidt era, where teams worked on that was that Ireland would do, I think it was 3 or 4 phases, and then you knew there was a strike move. So teams wouldn't bother too much in the first 3 or 4 phases in terms of watching stuff, because they knew they were just kind of set up for the strike move that was coming. But I think the difference here is, it's much more varied at the moment for Ireland. Like, they could strike off first phase or whatever, so you have to be on your toes all the time. But I think it's an interesting game for the weekend. I hope Wales play well. I hope they don't play so well that they beat us. But I do hope for a decent performance from Wales, because it's not nice to see any rugby nation kind of down in the doldrums like that. So I prefer that Wales, that this is the start of their kind of recovery, but not so much that they're going to beat us. So in terms of my prediction, it's going to be pretty boring, because everybody's going to predict the same thing, I think. But it's going to be an Ireland win and probably a bonus point win as well. But with hopefully a Welsh decent performance that gives them some heart to build on through the rest of the tournament, into the summer, and then on into the future as well. Okay. So next game then is, for me, the pick of the games of the weekend: England versus Scotland, Calcutta Cup. This is Saturday, 22nd February 2025. It's at the Allianz Stadium in Twickenham. It's a 4:45 kickoff, so I think 6:45 p.m. if you're in South Africa. Last year was Scotland 30, England 21, and then 2023, England 23, Scotland 29. So kind of similar scores there in terms of the margin, obviously a little bit bigger last year, but not by too much. Odds then, England 3-1 on favourites. Scotland are 16-5, and then the draw is 28-1. So England, favourites. We haven't seen that in a while for the for this fixture, and I think it speaks to how maybe England have taken a step forward in the last year or so, and maybe Scotland haven't done so as much. But one thing as well in terms of just the recent fixtures between these guys is England, kind of get stuck at that kind of number. Like, they scored 21 points last year, 23 the year before. I think it was only that crazy 38 all draw where they kind of broke, what was it, like whatever, 24, 25 points kind of thing, right? It's very similar to Scotland versus Ireland in the run that Ireland had or still have against Scotland, where, for whatever reason, Scotland find it hard to break that kind of 25, and above, kind of get into the 30s scoring against Ireland. I think when they eventually do, because they will obviously eventually beat Ireland and break that run, but when they do, I think it's going to be something like that, where they do break that 30 mark, and Ireland just, for whatever reason, the performance that day, aren't able to match them. And I think something similar for England. I think to win this game, they're going to have to probably score over 30 points, or just keep Scotland very, very quiet, which is honestly possible because, Scotland, we'll talk about it in a bit, but tactics have changed a lot for them in the last year as well. So England, that last gasp win against France, going to be a huge shot in the arm for them. They're going to be massively confident, I think, coming into this game because of it. France, though, something to beware. France did create a lot of chances, especially in that first half, but didn't take them. So Scotland know that there is space there to be exploited, but it remains to be seen whether, this Scotland team this year are going to be able to do that. Then England kicking more than any other team in the competition. And the interesting thing as well is it's mostly box kicks, chips, grubbers, like short kicks. So they're kicking generally about 10 meters on average shorter than other kicking teams in the competition, but they're kicking way more than anybody else as well. Like they're way up there at the top of the kicking charts. And that's something for fans to keep in mind as well, because people will say, oh, it's great, we have Finn Russell, or not Finn Russell, Finn Smith. Finn Smith, well, we have the two Finns, right? Although one has an extra N. But we have Finn Smith at 10, and then Marcus Smith, at 15, and it's a great chance to run the ball, etc. But a lot of the chances that they're getting in terms of running the ball and finding those broken fields situations is because of the way they're kicking. They're putting up those contestable kicks. They're getting guys up there. They're not necessarily always winning clean ball, but even if they get up and they just tap the ball back on their own side, then there's a bit of chaos there. And the likes of Finn Smith and Marcus Smith are ideally suited, even though they've got very different skill sets to exploit that. Finn Smith is the guy who, ball comes back, he gets it, he'll spot the guy where the space is and the guy that he wants to put through the gap. Whereas Marcus Smith, if he gets the ball, he'll spot the gap and go through it himself. I think that's kind of the big point, the difference between those two. But we have to remember, that a lot of this is coming from kicking, so people will say like that, again, they love the fact that England are running the ball more, but they're only getting the chance to run it because of the kicking strategy. And I think, it'd be interesting if England don't win this and England kind of kick to the same amount that they've been doing, because they've been averaging, I think, about 34 kicks a game. I think they have 68 or something like that in the tournament as a whole. So about 34 per game. If they're kicking that much and you think that other teams are kicking kind of in the mid-20s and Scotland actually lower than that, that if they lose this game, people will point at the kicking and say, oh, we're just kicking too much. Why did we kick the ball away? We didn't do that in the first couple of games. But they did do that in the first couple of games. It's just the perception of it will be different depending on whether England win or lose. The kicking doesn't seem to be noticed as much when England win. Like nobody mentioned England kicking at all against France, even though they kicked more against France than they did against Ireland. So kind of an interesting dynamic there. And the fact that also they're using shorter kicks. As I said earlier as well, favourites for the Calcutta Cup for the first time in a while. So that's a different dynamic as well. I think England, in terms of the nations that make up the Lions, so some people call them the home nations, but of those four teams, I think the favourites kind of mantle sits a lot better on England's shoulder than it does on any of the other teams. I think Ireland have, to some extent, certainly not in World Cups, but to some extent in other arenas, have gotten a bit more used to being favourites. I think for England, it's more of a natural thing for them, that it doesn't bother them as much. Like Scotland certainly struggle with it. Ireland struggle with it at times. I think Wales, have struggled with it at times as well. But for England, it seems to be just something that they don't, it doesn't faze them, I think, as much as other teams. So I don't think that's going to be a negative for them, that it might have been for maybe a Scotland team, trying to, get a first win against England in whatever many years, basically role reversal. But the other thing as well is there's a real belief in the squad, I think, that wasn't there last year as well. Even when they got that narrow win against Ireland, I don't think that, that was kind of seen as an isolated, one-off thing for them, because they then went on and didn't perform that great, in their other games. And, then they had like they had their summer tour, but the autumn, where they were getting close to teams but not winning, kind of left them in a bit of a limbo. People didn't know whether are they really developing or not. But now that they've had that win against France, people are kind of looking back, at the autumn and kind of putting it in that context now and saying, yeah, England are actually improving. But you're only one defeat away from people saying you're terrible, right? And that goes for any team, not just England. But I think there is a belief there within the squad that wasn't there last year. Scotland then, they didn't turn up against Ireland, and that's a pity. I wanted Scotland to give Ireland the game. I obviously didn't want them to beat us, but I do want to see teams, playing as well as they can. It makes for an exciting rugby. And again, I'm a rugby fan. I don't want my team winning just because the other team didn't perform. And sometimes the other team doesn't perform because you don't let them perform, right? Yeah, that's just the way rugby goes. But part of it with Scotland, I think there's definitely a mental thing there with Ireland for them that they need to get over. And maybe like for some England players, there might be that against Scotland, but I think there's enough of a turnover in, I think only 7 players, were played in the game last year for England. So, the majority, just about the majority of the starting 15, won't have that kind of hang up for them as well. So that could be, an advantage to them. But then for Scotland as well, that Finn Russell, Darcy Graham head clash, seeming very costly. I don't think it cost them games against Ireland. I think it may have cost them being a bit closer to Ireland, certainly. But, here, if they're going to be, say, without either one of those players, would be bad. But both of those players, that's a big loss, I think, for Scotland, especially seen as they build a lot of the game around Finn Russell. There was a time when he was kind of, the square peg in the round hole in Scotland. They had that big falling out with Gregor Townsend, and then they changed things where the play suits him a lot better. So that's something to certainly consider there. As I said, they're kicking a lot less than last year, and it honestly doesn't seem to be paying off for them. But this is something where, if you are changing your strategy, it doesn't straight away pay dividends. You have to see how it works over time, but they're hanging on to the ball a lot more than they were, and they're not putting in as long kicks as before. Like if you look at last year and the year before, and the two teams that kicked the most and kicked the longest in the Six Nations were Scotland and France. Like consistently, Scotland used to kick, over 1,000 meters, on a regular basis in Six Nations games. Now, they're down, around about half that or even less. So dramatic change in the way they've approached things. And I think in this game, we're going to see whether that's really going to pay off for them, because again, you have an England team who last year didn't kick that much, compared to Scotland, who are now kicking way more than Scotland, not kicking as long as Scotland used to do, though. And again, it's more contestable kicks, but it is again a kind of role reversal between the teams in terms of kicking strategy. Scotland as well, offloading a lot, so trying to keep that ball alive. England could potentially benefit from that, because teams that just offload because that's the way they play the game can sometimes just offload to the wrong player, right? One of the opposition players, and give away a try. Or Scotland could be doing their offload and find space that maybe wouldn't have been there otherwise. So that's going to be something to certainly keep an eye on. Then Scotland also been very aggressive at the breakdown, but England too, especially when they played both Curries against Ireland, in there winning turnovers, but they didn't have, I think, the game at that stage to exploit it. So, I think both teams are going to be very aggressive at the breakdown. It's going to be probably one of the, maybe for people who want to see expansive, fancy rugby, maybe not that exciting. But for me, it's going to be one of the most exciting parts of the weekend, is who's winning that breakdown battle. Because I think it's going to be hugely, you got Curry and Darge, etc., in there. And then Ben Earl as well, can get in there too. And then, it's modern day rugby. So you have backs and everything, like the front rows, whoever getting in there winning turnovers. So I think that's going to be a really exciting part of the game, certainly for me. And then, for Scotland, the other thing to consider as well is losing this game, I think, and for England to an extent too, but certainly for Scotland, losing this game will completely change the complexion of their championship this year, because for the last 4 years, almost like you could say Scotland are going to win the Calcutta Cup, right? So that's a win in the bag. And then after that, then, you got that win in the bag. You beat at least one of Wales or Italy, maybe both, right? And then if they can beat, France or Ireland, they're certainly in with a chance, a shout for the championship. Now, they haven't been able to put all of those things together in recent years, but that win against England has been there for the last 4 years for them. Take that away, and then, finishing third, fourth, suddenly becomes finishing fourth or fifth in the competition, and it doesn't look anywhere near as good as it was before. England, I think, defeating this one, there certainly will be more questions marks about Borthwick, etc. Is he the right man to bring this team, on? But I don't think it'll be as impactful as if Scotland win. I think there are some kind of murmurings about, Gregor Townsend. Has he kind of reached the limit where he can go with the Scotland team? He's obviously had a lot more time in position than Borthwick has. And, I think the other thing to consider is the fact that Franco Smith being linked with the Wales job. Now, he said, listen, I'm comfortable here at Glasgow. In the future, maybe I could look at an international job, but, I'm not, at the moment, I'm not thinking of that. Now, it doesn't mean that he won't, because you're not going to come out and say, oh yeah, I'll just leave my team and go to Wales. That's fine. Nobody's going to do that. So it could mean, it could be that he does end up as Welsh coach. But I think the thing for Scotland is that will that kind of, alert people in the Scottish Union that, wait, Franco Smith, we could lose the chance of him going to Wales. And then if we're not so sure that Gregor Townsend is the man forward, then the next person that, most Scottish people would think, should be the national coach is Franco Smith. He's done so well with Glasgow. He's won them a URC. He's brought that belief into that squad that the Scotland squad are missing. I think if the Scotland squad had the belief that Glasgow had, they'd be a lot closer to Ireland in those games and probably beating them in a few of them as well. So that's another kind of factor, I think, for this game is, a defeat for here in this one could potentially lead to Franco Smith being the head coach of Scotland, maybe come the summer tour. So not guaranteed, obviously, because Townsend has had up and downs in the past, and he's pretty much always survived. So, but certainly something to keep in mind with the result of this game. Then on to the final game of the weekend. It's Italy versus France, and it's Sunday, 23rd of February 2025. That's the Stadio Olimpico. It's a 3:00 kickoff, so 5:00 if you're watching in South Africa. Last year, France 13, Italy 13. Italy almost beating France away. And that would have been a huge result for them. But even a draw is an amazing result for them. Then 2023, another close one, Italy 24, France 29. So Italy getting close to France, in many years, certainly not every year. Sometimes there's the usual kind of 30 odd point defeat or whatever. But, when they hit their form and they get their game going, they certainly can cause this French team problems. The odds, 11-1 for France, 10-1, or 11-1, sorry, for Italy, 10-1 on for France, and 50-1 to draw. So bookies obviously not thinking that France are gonna struggle as much against Italy as they did last year and the year before as well. But I think it's certainly again an interesting dynamic between these teams. Italy, we've seen it now steadily improving year on year, and for whatever reason, France, have been struggling against them. You look at like the kind of in terms of the Six Nations overall, right, and the two big teams of the Six Nations, kind of going back to the start, have been England and France, and then Wales had a period where they were kind of dominant team. Ireland are having a little period now where they're a dominant team, but the consistent forces there have always been England and France. And for whatever reason, Italy have never beaten England, but they've beaten France plenty of times. And I don't think, again, it's kind of like Scotland against Ireland with that kind of hoodoo that Italy don't have that against France, but they do have against England. So I think this makes this a very interesting game here. Italy kind of, against Scotland, started poorly, did really well to come back into the game, but then didn't have that extra gear to go again, Then against Wales, they got themselves in front. They were very pragmatic. I think big difference between this team and Italy teams of kind of 2, 3, 4 years ago is that this Italy team takes their points. Also, this Italy team don't throw the ball around in their own 22 the way they used to. They're kicking a lot more. They're kicking smartly. They're playing in the right areas of the field, which certainly will help them, I think, in terms of trying to get field position and get some scores against this French team. I still think that, if they're going to win, they're obviously going to have to limit the amount of points that France is scoring. They're not going to beat France, 45 points to 40 or something like that. It's going to be kind of similar to 2023. If Italy can get to maybe, what France got, 29, and limit them to maybe 21, 24, that's kind of Italy's route to winning, or even less than that, maybe low 20s for Italy and somewhere in the teens for France would be the kind of winning scoreline you'd expect if Italy are going to win. Also, on the back of that, you look at the Italian teams, Benetton had a very poor start to the season. They grew, they got better, had some really big results, including beating La Rochelle and Bath in the Champions Cup. Then Zebre, earlier on this season, they beat Munster in the last couple of rounds of the URC, which have been played while, in the follow weeks of this competition. But, they beat Ulster and now they've beaten Edinburgh as well. Now, those players, obviously, most of them aren't involved in the Italy squad, but it still gives, positivity and energy to the Italian squad, seeing that happening there, and that's going to really, G those guys up as well. The fact that they're coming off the back of a win against Wales as well. And, Italy are always going to be looking now to, they're not going to be happy with one win. They want another win and then another win. And, they'll look at those, especially the home games, France in this one and Ireland the last, game. And they'll be thinking, nobody's given us a chance in that one. And, I think Lamoureux talked about as well that he doesn't feel like they get the respect they deserve. That they're looking to ambush one of those two teams, be it France or Ireland, in that final game in Rome. So I think they're going to be massively up for this. And I think for them, it's all about the start. I can't see Italy doing what they did against Scotland, where they come back at France and then, being able to reverse what they did against Scotland and actually being able to come back and then go away. I don't think they'll be able to do that. They might be able to come back and get close to them, but France will pull away again. So I think Italy will, other than sometimes you concede a try in the first couple of minutes and you can't do anything about it, right? But I'm talking about, I'd expect if Italy are going to win this one, they can't be, 19 points down at any stage during the game. I don't think that they're going to have the energy to not just come back, but then go above that and go again to win. So I think Italy will have to be within a score for much of the game or leading for much of the game as well, to get a win in this one. In terms of France then, started so comfortably against Wales, and then they come to that, England game. Yes, there was a factor from the weather conditions, but same weather conditions for both teams created, tons of chances and just couldn't finish them off. Now that could be just a blip, and it probably is just a blip from them. But it didn't show kind of a good mentality, I think, from the team, especially then. They got themselves in front with 5 minutes to go and ended up losing the game as well. So again, not a good thing from a mental point of view, from them. And then the fact as well that, Dupont had a poor game, probably a factor there as well. I'm wondering whether now they're, potentially maybe give Le Garrick, a start in this game, and then let him bring new energy in there, and then have Dupont coming back then, against Ireland, and just be really fired up for that game. Maybe that'd be a smart move for them. But they've got so many threats as well all around the field. If these two teams both play to their potential, I think most people agree France are going to win the game. So it's up to Italy, I think, to stop France from hitting that potential and then to hit their own potential themselves. So I think certainly a tougher task for Italy, to win this game than France, but it's not beyond, the realms of possibility for them to do that and get that win. France, the other thing I think maybe going in their favor is they'll be stung, from that loss against England. They'll want to, kind of restore some pride and produce a performance. I think that performance then will actually lead to a victory. So in this one, I'm going to go for a France win. But again, kind of similar to Wales against Ireland, I'm hoping for a decent Italy performance as well. I don't think Italy deserve to be trounced by any of the teams in this competition anymore. It can happen at times, but I think their performances kind of collectively over the seasons has gotten to the point where you would hope that they're within kind of a couple of scores of most oppositions. It's different if the opposition kind of maybe are 1 or 2 scores ahead and then get an extra try at the end, but not like kind of ones we've seen before where it's 36-0 or that kind of thing, or like the way France beat Wales 43-0. Hopefully Italy get points on the board and kind of close for much of the game. But that's our look ahead to the weekend's games. Do you agree with my predictions? How do you think your team is going, and how do you think they're going to go this weekend?